The 19th of June 1944, Task Force 58 steams 200 miles west of the Mariana Islands. USS Enterprise, USS Lexington, USS Bunker Hill, USS Yorktown, and 11 other carriers launch Grumman F6F Hellcats toward the approaching Japanese fleet. Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher commands the American carrier force from his flagship Lexington, 15 flat tops, carrying 905 aircraft against Imperial, Japan's desperate attempt to stop the American advance toward their homeland. What Japanese naval aviators discover this morning will shatter their understanding of aerial combat. Lieutenant Warrant Officer Sakio Komatsu adjusts his flight suit in the ready room aboard the carrier Taiho at 0730 hours. The morning briefing emphasized maximum strike force against American carriers detected east of Guam. Intelligence reports indicate 15 large flat tops operating in 3 task groups southwest of Saipan. Komatsu prepares to fly escort for the second attack wave that promises to deliver a decisive blow against the American invasion fleet. His aircraft carries a centerline drop tank, extending range to over 1,000 nautical miles, transforming the nimble fighter into a long-range escort platform. The attack doctrine emerged from Japan's successful operations in 1941 and 1942. Carrier-based strikes against Pearl Harbor, Darwin, and Ceylon achieved devastating results through coordinated attacks by experienced pilots flying superior aircraft. Commander Minoru Genda developed tactics that maximized the Zero's exceptional maneuverability and range advantages against Allied opposition. The concept relies on exploiting the Zero's ability to outturn any enemy fighter while maintaining longer combat endurance than American aircraft. A skilled pilot could dominate aerial engagements through superior positioning and energy management, regardless of numerical disadvantage. Task Force 58 represents America's most powerful carrier deployment since the war began. The 15 carriers include 6 Essex-class vessels, displacing 27,000 tons each, with reinforced flight decks designed to operate heavier aircraft. This construction philosophy differs fundamentally from Japanese carriers, with their lightweight structures optimized for maximum aircraft capacity. American designers prioritized durability and damage control over pure numbers, accepting reduced speed in exchange for enhanced survivability against enemy attack. The F6F Hellcat entered service in late 1943 as a direct response to combat experience against the Zero. Grumman engineers designed the aircraft specifically to counter Japanese fighters, using lessons learned from captured Zero specimens and pilot reports. The Hellcat weighs roughly 12,000 pounds fully loaded, with a 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine providing 380 miles per hour maximum speed. Armor protection includes 212 pounds of plate steel, protecting the pilot, oil cooler, and oil tank. Self-sealing fuel tanks prevent catastrophic fires from enemy gunfire. 6. 50 caliber Browning machine guns with 400 rounds per gun provide firepower exceeding any Japanese fighter's armament. The Japanese formation launching from carriers Taiho, Shokaku, and Zuikaku includes 128 aircraft approaching Task Force 58 from the west at 24,000 feet altitude. The pilots observe no American aircraft during their initial approach, suggesting tactical surprise against the enemy fleet. Many pilots in the formation completed training just months earlier, with less than 100 hours total flight time. The accelerated training program condensed what previously required 3 years into just 6 months due to mounting pilot losses throughout 1,943. Basic combat maneuvers received minimal attention while navigation and formation flying occupied most training hours. Carrier landing practice averaged just 5 successful traps before operational deployment. Lieutenant Junior Grade Takeshi Yamamoto represents one of the few experienced pilots remaining, with over 600 combat hours accumulated since 1941. His experience includes missions over the Dutch East Indies and Rabaul, where Japanese naval aviation previously dominated encounters. The Zero's reputation for invincibility remained intact through 1942, despite increasing Allied resistance. However, the Guadalcanal campaign revealed troubling trends as American pilots developed effective counter-tactics against previously unstoppable Japanese fighters. The Thach-Weave defensive maneuver negated the Zero's turning advantage, while hit-and-run attacks exploited its lack of armor protection. Ensign Hiroshi Tanaka flies as Yamamoto's wingman, having graduated from abbreviated flight training just 10 weeks earlier. His total flight time amounts to 75 hours, with only theoretical knowledge of aerial combat tactics. The fuel shortage forced elimination of advanced combat training, while ammunition scarcity limited gunnery practice to static ground targets. Most new pilots never fired their weapons at moving, aerial targets before entering combat. The contrast between veterans and replacements creates severe tactical limitations within Japanese formations. Experienced pilots must simultaneously engage enemy fighters while protecting inexperienced wingmen who lack situational awareness. This burden reduces overall formation effectiveness, as veterans cannot fully exploit their skills while shepherding novices through their first combat experiences. American radar operators aboard USS Yorktown detect the incoming Japanese formation at 150 miles distance, providing precious advance warning before visual contact. Fighter director officers vector combat air patrol fighters towards specific intercept coordinates using precise radar plotting. This technological advantage transforms aerial defense from reactive scrambling to coordinated interception with altitude and positional advantages. The fighter director system represents a revolutionary command and control capability developed through 2 years of combat experience. Each carrier maintains a combat information center, where trained officers track all airborne contacts using radar displays. Radio communications link directors with airborne fighters, providing real-time tactical guidance throughout engagements. This centralized control maximizes defensive efficiency by concentrating fighters at optimal intercept points. Commander David McCampbell leads VF-15's 1st Division from USS Essex, climbing toward the incoming raid at military power. His 12 Hellcats maintain tight formation while following radar vectors toward their assigned targets. Each pilot averages over 300 hours flight time, with extensive gunnery and tactical training completed stateside. The American training program expanded dramatically throughout 1943, producing thousands of new naval aviators annually. Operational training units provided roughly 500 hours total flight time, including about 150 hours in combat aircraft types. Advanced fighter training emphasized deflection shooting, energy management, and coordinated team tactics against dissimilar aircraft simulating enemy capabilities. The Hellcat's design philosophy prioritizes pilot survival through comprehensive protection systems. Armor plate surrounds the cockpit, including seatback, headrest, and floor panels totaling over 200 pounds. The bulletproof windscreen consists of 1.5-inch laminated glass, capable of stopping 7.7mm rounds at point-blank range. Self-sealing fuel tanks use multiple rubber layers that expand when punctured, preventing fuel leaks and fires. The robust airframe withstands significant battle damage while maintaining structural integrity. Test flights and combat experience demonstrate the Hellcat's ability to absorb multiple 20mm cannon hits while remaining controllable. This durability provides psychological confidence, as pilots know their aircraft can survive encounters that would destroy enemy fighters. The Japanese formation encounters the first Hellcats at 0915 hours, approximately 90 miles west of Guam. The American fighters attack from above and behind, using their altitude advantage for high-speed diving passes. Ensign Tanaka breaks left, attempting to force an overshoot, but the Hellcat follows his turn with surprising agility. The American fighter's superior power allows sustained turning at speeds where the Zero's controls become heavy and unresponsive. Multiple .50 caliber rounds strike Tanaka's aircraft, severing control cables and puncturing fuel tanks that immediately ignite. The Zero's lack of armor protection proves catastrophic as armor-piercing incendiary rounds penetrate the thin aluminum structure. Tanaka's aircraft explodes when flames reach the wing fuel tanks, demonstrating the Zero's vulnerability to concentrated firepower. This shocking destruction contradicts everything Japanese pilots believed about their aircraft's combat superiority. The psychological impact spreads through the formation as pilots witness their fighters destroyed with apparent ease. Commander McCampbell's division executes coordinated slashing attacks against the Japanese formation using superior speed and firepower. The Hellcats dive from 28,000 feet, reaching 450 miles per hour in their attack runs before zooming back to altitude. This energy-based tactical approach negates the Zero's maneuverability advantage while exploiting its inferior high-speed handling characteristics. The Japanese pilots attempt traditional turning engagements but cannot force the Americans into sustained dogfights. Each Hellcat pilot maintains strict energy discipline, refusing to engage in low-speed turning battles where Zeros excel. The Americans demonstrate remarkable teamwork, with wingmen protecting leaders during attack runs while maintaining mutual support throughout the engagement. This coordination reflects extensive multi-aircraft tactical training, emphasizing section and division tactics over individual combat. The Hellcat's robust radio equipment enables clear communications despite electromagnetic interference from dozens of simultaneous transmissions. Japanese pilots struggle with inferior radio systems that produce static and feedback, preventing effective tactical coordination. Many Zero pilots disable their radios entirely due to constant interference, relying on hand signals and pre-briefed formations. This communication breakdown compounds tactical disadvantages as Japanese formations fragment under coordinated American attacks. The first engagement ends with severe Japanese losses, as 12 Zeros fall to Hellcat guns within 8 minutes. American pilots observe multiple characteristics that contradict intelligence estimates of enemy capabilities. The Japanese fighters demonstrate poor gunnery, with most bursts passing harmlessly behind intended targets. Their evasive maneuvers follow predictable patterns, suggesting inadequate combat training and limited tactical repertoire. Several Japanese pilots abandon advantageous positions through apparent confusion or inexperience, failing to exploit brief opportunities when Hellcats present vulnerable aspects. Lieutenant Alexander Vrasiu from VF-16 aboard Lexington intercepts a second Japanese formation, attempting to penetrate the fighter screen. His section of 4 Hellcats engages 12 enemy aircraft with devastating effectiveness, shooting down 6 planes in 8 minutes. Vrasiu expends only 360 rounds of his 2,400-round ammunition load, demonstrating the effectiveness of American gunnery training. The concentrated firepower of 6.50 caliber guns proves overwhelming against the Zero's fragile structure. Short bursts produce immediate catastrophic damage, with wings separating, engines exploding, and fuel tanks igniting from incendiary rounds. The technological disparity becomes increasingly apparent as the battle develops throughout the morning. Hellcats absorb multiple hits from Japanese 7.7mm machine guns without significant damage, while their own weapons destroy Zeros with minimal ammunition expenditure. American pilots report enemy aircraft disintegrating under concentrated fire, often exploding after just 2 or 3 seconds of accurate shooting. The Zero's 20mm cannons pose a theoretical threat, but low muzzle velocity and limited ammunition reduce their practical effectiveness. Most Japanese pilots exhaust their cannon ammunition quickly through poor fire discipline, leaving only rifle-caliber machine guns for subsequent engagements. Radar-directed fighter control enables efficient vector management as American fighters intercept multiple incoming waves. Fighter direction officers maintain tactical awareness through radar tracking and pilot reports, positioning fresh fighters at optimal intercept points. This systematic defense prevents Japanese formations from coordinating massed attacks against the carrier force. Individual Japanese groups arrive piecemeal, encountering concentrated Hellcat formations positioned for maximum tactical advantage. The raiders suffer progressive attrition before reaching effective attack range of American vessels. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa launches his second wave at 0856 hours, comprising 128 aircraft from all available carriers. The strike includes 48 Zero fighters, 53 Judy dive bombers, and 27 Jill torpedo bombers, tasked with overwhelming American defenses through sheer numbers. However, the inexperienced pilots struggle with basic navigation as formations fragment during the long approach flight. Several groups become lost entirely, wandering aimlessly while consuming precious fuel reserves before finding their targets. Russell Reiserer from VF-31 aboard USS Cabot intercepts the second wave's leading elements 60 miles from the task force. His division of Hellcats attacks from up-sun, achieving complete tactical surprise against the enemy formation. The Japanese pilots fail to maintain proper lookout doctrine, allowing the Americans to approach undetected until opening fire. Within minutes, 5 enemy aircraft spiral toward the ocean, trailing smoke and flames from catastrophic structural damage. The surviving Japanese aircraft attempt to continue their attack run, but encounter successive Hellcat formations positioned at different altitudes. Each American interception follows similar patterns, with diving attacks from superior altitude followed by zoom climbs back to perch positions. The Hellcats maintain energy advantage throughout engagements, dictating combat terms while denying Japanese pilots opportunities for effective retaliation. This tactical dominance reflects superior aircraft performance, combined with extensive energy management training that maximizes the Hellcats' advantages. Japanese pilots trained for close-range maneuvering combat find themselves unable to engage effectively at high speeds, where the Zero becomes unmaneuverable. The second wave's attack, on Task Force 58, achieves minimal results as survivors penetrate the fighter screen in scattered groups. Anti-aircraft fire from screening destroyers and cruisers creates dense barrage patterns that further disperse attacking formations. The few Japanese aircraft reaching the carriers encounter concentrated defensive fire from multiple vessels, firing proximity-fused shells. Only one torpedo bomber successfully launches its weapon, which USS Indiana easily evades through timely maneuvering. Commander McCampbell, leading VF-15's second strike, encounters the third Japanese wave at 1,100 hours. His formation of 12 Hellcats engages over 40 enemy aircraft in a running battle lasting 20 minutes. McCampbell personally destroys 7 Japanese planes, while his wingman, Lieutenant Roy Rushing, accounts for 4 additional victories. The engagement demonstrates the cumulative effect of American training advantages as experienced pilots exploit every enemy mistake. Japanese formations dissolve into Tupa fire, individual aircraft maneuvering defensively, abandoning their attack mission to survive overwhelming fighter opposition. Lieutenant Kenji Suzuki observes the third wave's destruction from his damaged Zero struggling back toward the Japanese fleet. His aircraft bears multiple 50 caliber holes through wings and fuselage, with one elevator cable severed and the engine running rough. The severe losses exceed anything experienced in previous carrier battles, including Midway, where at least some aircraft successfully attacked enemy ships. Today's operations achieve virtually nothing while losing dozens of aircraft and irreplaceable pilots to enemy fighters. The intelligence failure becomes apparent as returning pilots report encountering an entirely new American fighter with unprecedented performance characteristics. Previous intelligence estimates based on captured F6F Wildcats suggested American fighters remained inferior to updated Zero variants in most performance parameters, except diving speed. The Hellcat's ability to outclimb, outturn at high speed, and absorb tremendous damage contradicts every assumption underlying Japanese tactical planning. The enemy fighter appears purpose-built to exploit every Zero weakness while negating its traditional advantages. Aboard Taiho, Adem, Ozawa receives fragmentary reports indicating catastrophic losses among all 3 attack waves. Surviving pilots describe overwhelming fighter opposition with American aircraft appearing at every altitude and direction. The coordinated defensive system prevents concentration of attacking forces while achieving disproportionate attrition against Japanese formations. Radio intercepts suggest American losses remain minimal despite engaging superior numbers of Japanese aircraft throughout the morning's operations. Air operations officers aboard the Japanese carriers tally the mounting casualties as aircraft fail to return from their missions. The first wave launched 69 aircraft, but only 27 returned to their carriers, many bearing significant battle damage. The second wave suffers even worse, with barely one-third of 128 aircraft surviving the American fighter gauntlet. These losses represent not just aircraft, but irreplaceable pilots whose training required years of peacetime development. The implications extend beyond immediate tactical defeat to strategic collapse of Japanese naval aviation capability. The returning pilots exhibit signs of severe psychological trauma from their encounter with American fighters. Young aviators who graduated training just weeks earlier describe terror and helplessness facing an enemy that seems invulnerable to their attacks. Their 7.7mm machine guns appear completely ineffective, while American 50 seconds tear their aircraft apart with devastating efficiency. The myth of the Zero's invincibility shatters completely as pilots witness squadron mates destroyed without opportunity for effective resistance. Veteran pilots like Yamamoto struggle to comprehend the reversal of aerial superiority they enjoyed throughout the war's early years. The tactical methods developed through successful campaigns in China, Southeast Asia, and the early Pacific no longer function against this new American fighter. Years of combat experience become meaningless when the enemy refuses engagement on terms where Japanese pilots excel. The psychological foundation of Japanese naval aviation, built on technical superiority and pilot skill, crumbles in a single morning's combat. Morale aboard Japanese carriers plummets as maintenance crews count empty parking spots where aircraft should have returned. The flight decks designed to operate 70-80 aircraft each now hold scattered remnants of once powerful air groups. Mechanics and armourers who prepared aircraft for the morning's strikes stand idle with no machines to service or weapons to load. The human dimension of defeat becomes apparent as friends and squadmates fail to return from what promised to be a decisive victory. Admiral Ozawa contemplates the implications of continuing operations with drastically reduced air groups. The fourth wave of 82 aircraft is prepared for launch, but reconnaissance reports indicate the American carriers maintain full combat capability despite 3 massed attacks. The sacrifice of additional pilots and aircraft seems pointless against an enemy that demonstrates overwhelming tactical and technical superiority. Yet withdrawal abandons the Saipan garrison and acknowledges defeat in what Japanese planners considered the decisive battle for Pacific supremacy. The communication breakdown between senior commanders and flying personnel becomes critical, as accurate battle assessment proves impossible. Surviving pilots provide conflicting reports about enemy strength and capabilities, while staff officers struggle to compile coherent tactical analysis. The traditional Japanese emphasis on spiritual determination over material factors prevents honest evaluation of American advantages. Many commanders refuse to acknowledge that enemy fighters could so completely dominate their naval aviators, regardless of numerical superiority. The F6F Hellcat's dominance stems from comprehensive design advantages addressing every aspect of aerial combat. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine produces 2,000 horsepower, nearly double the Zero's 1,130 horsepower Sakai 21 engine. This power advantage translates into superior climb rate, acceleration, and high-altitude performance, where thin air reduces the Zero's already marginal power-to-weight ratio. The Hellcat climbs at roughly 3,500 feet per minute, compared to the Zero's about 2,600 feet per minute, enabling American pilots to maintain energy advantage throughout engagements. The Hellcat's armament of 6 50-caliber Browning machine guns with an ample loadout of 400 rounds per gun delivers devastating firepower with excellent ballistic characteristics. Each gun fires around 800 and 850 rounds per minute with a muzzle velocity of about 2,900 feet per second, maintaining flat trajectory and hitting power at combat ranges. The total firepower adds up to roughly 80-85 rounds per second of armor-piercing incendiary ammunition capable of penetrating engine blocks and igniting fuel tanks. The ammunition supply provides close to 30 seconds of sustained fire, allowing multiple engagement opportunities without severe ammunition conservation concerns. The Zero's armament combines two 20mm Type 99 cannons with two 7.7mm Type 97 machine guns, presenting theoretical firepower advantages through explosive cannon shells. However, the cannon's relatively low muzzle velocity creates significant trajectory drop, requiring different aiming points from the machine guns. Limited ammunition of about 60 rounds per cannon forces pilots to conserve fire, reducing practical rate of fire during extended engagements. The 7.7mm machine guns lack stopping power against armored American fighters, while their generous ammunition supply cannot compensate for inadequate penetration capability. American radar technology provides decisive tactical advantages through early warning and fighter direction capabilities. The SK air search radar detects aircraft at ranges approaching 100 miles, while height-finding sets determine altitude with useful accuracy. This information feeds into combat information centers, where trained officers plot all contacts on vertical display boards. Fighter director officers vector defending fighters using VHF radio equipment, providing clear communications despite atmospheric interference. The integrated system transforms aerial defense from individual pilot initiative to coordinated tactical operations, maximizing defensive efficiency. Japanese carriers lack comparable radar networks, with most vessels relying on visual observation for air defense coordination. The Type 21 air search radar installed on some carriers provides limited detection range with poor reliability and frequent false contacts. Without height-finding capability or integrated fighter direction, Japanese combat air patrols operate independently using pre-war tactical doctrine. The absence of centralized control prevents efficient fighter allocation against multiple incoming raids, while limiting tactical flexibility during engagements. By late 1944, a new Japanese Navy pilot might graduate with as little as 40 hours flying time, while his American opponent often had at least 525 hours flying time. American pilots average extensive gunnery training with camera guns, recording accuracy during simulated combat. Formation tactics receive equal emphasis, with pilots learning energy management, mutual support, and section tactics during advanced training. Operational training units provide realistic combat preparation, using experienced instructors rotating from frontline squadrons. Japanese replacement pilots average roughly 8,100 hours, total flight time with minimal combat training before operational deployment. Fuel shortages force reliance on ground instruction and limited flying hours in obsolete training aircraft. Most pilots never fire weapons at aerial targets before entering combat, while formation flying emphasizes parade ground precision over tactical flexibility. The abbreviated training program eliminates much of the aerobatics, instrument flying, and night operations considered essential in the pre-war curriculum. The qualitative difference in pilot capability magnifies aircraft performance disparities throughout aerial engagements. The fourth Japanese wave launches despite mounting evidence of catastrophic losses among earlier strikes. Admiral Ozawa commits his remaining 82 aircraft, hoping to achieve some damage against American carriers before withdrawing westward. However, these aircraft encounter even more intense fighter opposition as American carriers recover, refuel, and relaunch their combat air patrols. The systematic destruction continues with mechanical precision as Hellcats positioned at multiple altitudes engage each incoming group. By 14:30 hours, American search aircraft locate the Japanese fleet 275 miles west-northwest of Task Force 58. Admiral Mitchell launches a maximum effort strike of 216 aircraft, despite the extreme range requiring careful fuel management. The American strike includes 85 Hellcat fighters, demonstrating offensive capability beyond pure fleet defense roles. While Japanese carriers struggle to maintain minimal defensive patrols with surviving aircraft, American carriers surge overwhelming offensive power. The role reversal from morning's defensive success to afternoon offensive operations showcases American operational superiority. The American strike finds Japanese carriers virtually defenseless, with only about 35 operational fighters remaining from over 400 aircraft available that morning. Hellcat fighters sweep aside token opposition while dive bombers and torpedo planes attack without significant interference. The carrier Hio sinks after multiple torpedo hits, while Zuikaku and Chiyoda suffer severe damage from bomb strikes. Japanese anti-aircraft fire proves ineffective against coordinated attacks pressed home with determination by experienced American pilots. The return flight occurs after sunset, creating navigation challenges as pilots struggle to locate their carriers in darkness. Admiral Mitcher makes the unprecedented decision to illuminate his carriers despite submarine threats, turning on searchlights and deck lights to guide returning aircraft. This calculated risk prioritizes aircrew recovery over ship security, demonstrating American confidence in their tactical position. Despite losing 80 aircraft to fuel exhaustion and night landing accidents, personnel recovery reaches roughly 85% as destroyers rescue pilots from the water. The operational tempo continues as carriers prepare for dawn searches to locate the retreating Japanese fleet. Admiral Ozawa's withdrawal acknowledges complete defeat, with only about 35 operational aircraft remaining from roughly 430 embarked that morning. The Japanese fleet that entered battle expecting decisive victory retreats, having accomplished nothing beyond confirming American aerial supremacy. The loss ratio exceeds 10 to 1 in favor of American forces, with Japanese naval aviation effectively eliminated as an offensive force. The implications extend beyond immediate tactical defeat, as Japan lacks resources to rebuild carrier air groups before American forces approach the home islands. The Battle of the Philippine Sea demonstrates that technological superiority, combined with superior training, can completely negate enemy tactical doctrine, regardless of determination or experience. Japanese naval aviation built its reputation on superior aircraft and extensively trained pilots achieving decisive victories throughout 1941, 1942. The Zero fighter dominated every opponent through exceptional maneuverability and range, while pilots accumulated combat experience across multiple campaigns. This combination created psychological supremacy, where Allied pilots entered combat expecting defeat against Japanese fighters. The Hellcat's introduction reverses this dynamic completely through purpose-built design, specifically countering Japanese advantages. American designers accepted weight penalties for armor and self-sealing tanks, creating an aircraft that survived damage that destroyed Zeros instantly. The powerful engine provided performance margins, allowing pilots to dictate engagement terms while avoiding situations where Zeros excelled. The massive firepower of 6.50 caliber guns overwhelmed Japanese aircraft structures designed for minimum weight rather than battle damage resistance. The American training system's expansion demonstrates industrial-age warfare's triumph over craftsman tradition. While Japan struggled to train hundreds of replacement pilots using abbreviated programs, America trained thousands using systematic curriculum developed through operational analysis. The assembly line approach to pilot production achieved consistent quality through standardized instruction and extensive flying hours. Each American pilot represented an interchangeable component in the naval aviation system rather than an irreplaceable individual whose loss crippled unit effectiveness. The radar-directed fighter control system exemplifies technological force multiplication beyond individual aircraft capabilities. The ability to position fighters optimally before visual contact negates Japanese tactical surprise while maximizing defensive efficiency. This systematic approach to aerial defense transforms carrier task forces from vulnerable targets to nearly impregnable fortresses against conventional air attack. The integration of sensors, communications, and command functions creates synergistic capabilities exceeding the sum of individual components. Japanese naval doctrine's failure to adapt to changing circumstances proves fatal when pre-war assumptions encounter wartime reality. The emphasis on offensive operations using carrier aviation to achieve decisive victory through single engagements becomes irrelevant against an enemy that refuses such terms. American forces accept gradual attrition through sustained operations rather than seeking climactic battles for theater supremacy. This operational patience, combined with industrial superiority, guarantees eventual victory regardless of individual engagement outcomes. The human cost extends beyond aircraft and pilots to institutional knowledge accumulated through years of training and combat experience. Japan's pre-war naval aviators represented an elite cadre whose skills required extensive development through rigorous selection and training. Their loss cannot be replaced through abbreviated wartime programs that produce pilots with minimal competence rather than excellence. The qualitative decline becomes self-reinforcing as inexperienced pilots suffer disproportionate losses, further degrading overall force effectiveness. Task Force 58 continues operations off Saipan, despite Japanese attempts to disrupt the invasion through carrier aviation. The morning of June 20th brings renewed searches for the retreating Japanese fleet while maintaining defensive patrols against potential land-based attacks. American pilots who survived yesterday's combat describe it as just like an old-time turkey shoot, giving the battle its enduring nickname. The term captures both the one-sided nature of aerial combat and the mechanical efficiency of destroying Japanese aircraft. The final tally reveals the catastrophic scale of Japanese defeat. With 445 aircraft destroyed, including roughly 395 carrier planes and approximately 50 land-based aircraft. American losses total 123 aircraft, with around 80 falling to operational accidents rather than enemy action. Only 43 American planes fall to Japanese fighters and anti-aircraft fire during 2 days of intense aerial combat. The 10-to-1 exchange ratio exceeds any previous carrier battle, including the decisive American victory at Midway. More significantly, Japan loses over 400 pilots, including instructors recalled from training units, representing the last reservoir of experienced naval aviators. Admiral Ozawa's report to Combined Fleet Headquarters acknowledges the effective destruction of Japanese carrier aviation as an offensive force. The surviving carriers possess ships and aircraft but lack trained pilots capable of conducting effective operations against American forces. The mobile fleet that sortied expecting to achieve decisive victory returns having demonstrated only American aerial supremacy. The strategic implications become apparent as American forces continue advancing toward Japan without meaningful aerial opposition from the Partick Imperial Navy. The technological revolution in naval warfare, demonstrated at the Philippine Sea, influences post-war aviation development worldwide. The integration of radar, communications, and fighter control establishes patterns followed by every major navy seeking carrier aviation capability. The emphasis on pilot survivability through aircraft protection and systematic training becomes standard practice, replacing pre-war acceptance of high pilot attrition. The Hellcat itself continues serving into the post-war era and into the early stages of the Korean War, adapted for ground attack missions that exploit its robust construction and heavy armament. American industrial superiority ultimately proves decisive through quantity and quality advantages that overwhelm Japanese forces, regardless of tactical innovation or individual courage. The ability to produce thousands of aircraft monthly while training pilots to operate them effectively creates insurmountable numerical superiority. Each American loss can be replaced multiple times, while Japanese losses become permanent degradation of combat capability. The production statistics reveal the hopelessness of Japan's position. America produces about 96,000 aircraft in 1944, while Japan manages only around 28,000, despite total national mobilization. The Hellcat achieves the highest kill ratio of any American fighter, with 5,223 confirmed victories against 270 losses in aerial combat. This roughly 19-to-1 ratio exceeds every other aircraft type, while accounting for about 75% of all U.S. Navy aerial victories, despite entering service halfway through the war. The F6F validates the design philosophy, prioritizing pilot survival and firepower over pure performance metrics. Veterans consistently praise the Hellcats for giving flight characteristics and ability to absorb battle damage while maintaining combat effectiveness. Japanese naval aviation never recovers from the Marianas disaster, relegated to desperate, kamikaze attacks that sacrifice pilots and aircraft for minimal strategic impact. The institutional knowledge accumulated through decades of development disappears in a single day's combat against superior American forces. The Zero fighter that symbolized Japanese aerial supremacy becomes synonymous with obsolescence and vulnerability against modern American fighters. The psychological impact extends beyond military defeat to national recognition that spiritual determination cannot overcome material inferiority against industrial democracy's arsenal. The Battle of the Philippine Sea represents the culmination of American naval aviation development from Pearl Harbor's disaster through methodical construction of overwhelming superiority. The carrier task forces that Japan attacked in 1941, hoping to eliminate American Pacific presence, return multiplied many times over, with superior aircraft, pilots, and tactical doctrine. The transformation from desperate defense to offensive supremacy occurs through systematic application of industrial resources, technological innovation, and operational analysis. The Hellcat fighter embodies this evolution from reactive response to Japanese initiative toward purposeful dominance through superior design and employment. Admiral Mitcher's after-action report emphasizes the totality of American victory while acknowledging the fortunate circumstances that concentrated Japanese attacks against prepared defenses. The combination of radar warning, fighter direction, and superior aircraft creates near-perfect conditions for defensive success against conventional air attacks. However, he warns that future enemies might develop asymmetric responses, requiring continued innovation rather than reliance on proven formulas. This prescient observation anticipates the kamikaze phenomenon that emerges from Japan's desperate attempts to offset conventional inferiority. The individual pilot experiences reveal the human dimension beyond statistical abstractions of victory and defeat. American pilots describe the surreal experience of shooting down multiple enemy aircraft with minimal effort while feeling sympathy for opponents flying obsolete aircraft with inadequate training. Japanese survivors recount the horror of watching squadron mates destroyed without opportunity for effective resistance against an enemy that seems invulnerable. These personal narratives capture warfare's essential tragedy, where technological superiority translates into human suffering regardless of individual courage or determination. The Marianas Turkey Shoot enters aviation history as a demonstration of American aerial supremacy achieved through systematic superiority in training, technology, and tactical doctrine. The battle proves that modern warfare rewards industrial capability and scientific advancement over warrior tradition and spiritual determination. Japan's attempt to achieve decisive victory through conventional carrier aviation ends in catastrophic defeat that eliminates their naval aviation as an effective force. The Imperial Navy that dominated the Pacific in 1942 becomes incapable of meaningful offensive operations by June 1944. The strategic consequences extend beyond immediate military defeat to fundamental reassessment of warfare's nature in the industrial age. Japan's military leadership must confront the reality that their nation lacks resources to compete with American production capability, regardless of tactical innovation. The decision to continue fighting despite mathematical certainty of defeat reflects cultural inability to accept surrender rather than rational strategic calculation. The kamikaze phenomenon emerges from this cognitive dissonance between accepting defeat's inevitability while refusing its implications. The sinking of carriers Shokaku and Taiho by American submarines on June 19 compounds the aerial defeat with irreplaceable platform losses. Shokaku, veteran of Pearl Harbor and every major carrier battle except Midway, succumbs to torpedoes from USS Kavala while refueling aircraft. Taiho, Japan's newest and most advanced carrier with an armored flight deck, sinks from a single torpedo hit from USS Albacore that causes catastrophic gasoline vapor explosions due to poor damage control. These losses eliminate not just ships but the institutional experience of their crews, who cannot be replaced before war's end. Flight deck officers, maintenance chiefs, veteran signalmen, and battle-hardened bridge personnel, men whose expertise took years to develop, go down with their ships. The Japanese carrier force loses not only the ability to launch large-scale operations, but also the human infrastructure required to train and lead any future air groups effectively. The technological and training advantages demonstrated during the Marianas Turkey Shoot establish patterns that continue throughout the remainder of the Pacific War. American forces advance inexorably toward Japan, while Japanese forces attempt increasingly desperate defensive measures without meaningful success. The carrier task forces that seemed vulnerable to Japanese attack in 1941 become, by mid-1944, unstoppable instruments of American power projection. The transformation from defensive response to offensive supremacy occurs through the methodical application of industrial democracy's advantages against the structural limitations of a militarist autocracy. The battle's aftermath sees American carriers continuing operations off Saipan, while Japanese survivors retreat to anchorages beyond American aircraft range. The invasion proceeds without meaningful interference from Japanese naval aviation, which has ceased to exist as an effective force. The airfields on Saipan, Tinian, and Guam soon host B-29 bombers that bring strategic bombing directly to Japan's home islands. The carrier battle intended to prevent this outcome instead confirms American ability to project power wherever national strategy requires, regardless of Japanese opposition. The very operation Japan hoped would halt the U.S. advance becomes the moment that locks in their strategic defeat at sea. Veterans of the Philippine Sea remember the morning of the 19th of June 1944 as the day American naval aviation achieved unquestioned supremacy over its Japanese opponents. Months of preparation, training, and technological development culminate in a few hours of aerial combat that eliminate Japanese carrier aviation's offensive capability. The Hellcat fighter proves itself as the weapon that transforms American carriers from vulnerable targets into dominant instruments of naval power. The pilots who fly these aircraft demonstrate that systematic training can produce competent aviators in quantity, overwhelming elite opponents through both numerical and qualitative superiority. The lessons learned from the Marianas Turkey Shoot influence naval aviation development for decades, as nations recognize the importance of integrating technology, training, and tactical doctrine. The emphasis on pilot survivability through aircraft protection becomes a standard design philosophy, while radar-directed fighter control establishes patterns for fleet air defense in every major navy. The American victory demonstrates that industrial production capacity combined with technological innovation can create military superiority that traditional martial virtues alone cannot overcome. The battle stands as testament to democracy's ability to mobilize resources effectively against authoritarian aggression when national survival demands total commitment. The human cost, measured in Japanese lives lost during futile attacks against superior American forces, represents warfare's essential tragedy, where courage cannot overcome material disadvantage. Young Japanese pilots who dreamed of glory defending their homeland instead die in obsolete aircraft, overwhelmed by an enemy they cannot effectively engage. Their sacrifice achieves nothing beyond demonstrating American superiority while depleting Japan's remaining reservoir of trained aviators. The survivor's guilt experienced by pilots who return from missions where squadron mates perish becomes a defining characteristic of Japanese naval aviation's final period. Men like Yamamoto and Suzuki, who began the war as confident masters of the air, now struggle to reconcile their skill and experience with a reality in which every engagement feels predetermined. The F6F Hellcat's success validates the design philosophy that prioritizes pilot survival and consistent performance over fragile, extreme edge capability that requires exceptional skill to exploit. Average American pilots achieve extraordinary results, flying aircraft that forgive mistakes while delivering devastating firepower against fragile opponents. The Zero, which demands near perfection from its pilots while offering no margin for error, becomes a liability when flown by men lacking extensive training and combat experience. The contrast between design philosophies reflects deeper cultural differences about valuing human life versus prioritizing aggressive offensive capability at any cost. The Battle of the Philippine Sea marks the end of carrier aviation as a balanced competition between opposing forces with complementary advantages. American technological and training superiority creates conditions where combat becomes execution rather than contest, with outcomes determined before engagements begin. The Japanese pilots who launch from their carriers on June 19th fly into predetermined destruction, lacking any realistic capability to achieve their objectives against prepared American defenses. The Turkey Shoot metaphor captures this essential imbalance, where one side holds overwhelming advantages that guarantee victory regardless of enemy bravery or determination. The strategic implications of the Marianas Turkey Shoot extend throughout the rest of the Pacific War, as Japan cannot rebuild carrier aviation capability before eventual defeat. The pilots lost during one day's combat represent years of training investment that cannot be replaced through abbreviated programs, producing only marginally competent replacements. The institutional knowledge accumulated through decades of development disappears when experienced pilots die without opportunity to transfer their skills to the next generation. The qualitative collapse becomes irreversible, as inexperienced pilots suffer disproportionate losses in subsequent operations, further degrading overall effectiveness. The morning of the 19th of June 1944 witnesses the destruction of Japanese naval aviation as an effective military force through systematic demonstration of American superiority. The F6F Hellcat fighter serves as the principal instrument of this victory, combining protective design, powerful armament, and superior performance in an aircraft that average pilots can employ effectively. The integration of radar warning, fighter direction, and coordinated tactics creates defensive efficiency that overwhelms Japanese attacks, regardless of determination or tactical improvisation. The battle proves that industrial democracy's arsenal can produce military superiority through methodical application of technological and training advantages against traditional military opponents who rely on spiritual factors to overcome material disadvantages. The Marianas Turkey Shoot enters history as the decisive moment when American naval aviation achieved a level of supremacy that would carry through to the Pacific War's conclusion. The Japanese carriers that once projected power throughout the Pacific become, in the months that follow, little more than vulnerable symbols of a vanished dominance. The transformation from Pearl Harbor's vulnerability to the Philippine Sea's dominance demonstrates democracy's capacity for military regeneration when faced with existential threats. The battle stands as proof that when industrial power, technological innovation, and disciplined training are harnessed together, they can reshape the balance of power in ways no pre-war doctrine could fully anticipate.